I paid off my parents' mortgage as a surprise for their anniversary. Then got a group text. We're giving your room to Noah's girlfriend. Unlike you, she actually contributes to this family. My mom added, don't make it awkward. Just be grateful you were ever included. I just responded, noted. That night, I made 2 calls and they discovered the house was no longer theirs. I, 29M, had been planning the surprise for months. My parents' 30th wedding anniversary was coming up and I wanted to do something special. They'd been struggling with their mortgage payments ever since Dad's hours got cut at the factory and Mom's part-time job at the grocery store wasn't covering much. I'd been doing well in tech, pulling in 6 figures, so I decided to pay off their entire mortgage as their anniversary gift. The paperwork took weeks. I had to coordinate with their bank, get all the legal documents in order, and make sure everything was legitimate. When I finally transferred the $180,000 to clear their debt, I felt this incredible rush of satisfaction. I was going to present them with the deed at their anniversary dinner next weekend. They had no idea what was coming. That's when I got the group text. I was at my apartment, reviewing some code for a client project, when my phone buzzed. It was a family group chat that included me, my parents, and my younger brother Noah. Mom had started it a few months ago to coordinate family stuff. The message was from Noah. We're giving your room to my girlfriend Sarah. Unlike you, she actually contributes to this family. I stared at the screen, confused. My room? I hadn't lived at home in 7 years, but my parents had always kept my childhood bedroom exactly as I left it. Mom used to joke that it was my museum, complete with my old comic books and high school trophies. Before I could respond, another message appeared from Mom. Don't make it awkward. Just be grateful you were ever included. My hands went numb. Grateful I was ever included? In my own family. More messages started flooding in. Noah explained that Sarah had been staying over most nights anyway, and since she helped Mom with groceries sometimes and did dishes, she was more useful around the house than I was. Dad chimed in, agreeing that it made practical sense. They were treating this like some kind of business decision. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, just processing. These were the same parents I'd just financially saved from losing their house. The same parents who had raised me, supposedly loved me, who I'd been planning to surprise with the biggest gift of their lives. Finally, I typed back. Noted. That was it. Just one word. But in that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. I'd spent years trying to be the good son, visiting when I could despite my busy schedule, sending money when they needed it, being there for family events. And this is how they saw me? As less valuable than my brother's girlfriend, who did dishes? I made 2 calls that night. The first was to my lawyer, Jessica, who'd helped me with the mortgage payoff paperwork. I explained the situation, and she was quiet for a long moment before telling me exactly what I needed to know. Since the house was now technically mine, I'd paid off the mortgage but hadn't transferred ownership back to my parents yet. I had options. The second call was to a property management company I'd worked with before for some rental investments. I needed them to prepare some documents. By morning, I had a plan. Update 1. The anniversary dinner was that Saturday. I showed up right on time, dressed nicely, carrying what everyone assumed was a gift bag. My parents seemed surprised I'd come at all, given the group text situation, but they didn't bring it up. Noah was there with Sarah, who kept shooting me these weird looks like she was expecting me to cause drama. We went through the usual small talk. Dad complained about work, Mom talked about her book club, Noah bragged about some promotion at his sales job. Sarah chimed in occasionally about how much she loved staying at the house and how grateful she was for the family's acceptance. When it came time for gifts, my parents opened the usual stuff, a nice picture frame from Noah and Sarah, some flowers, a bottle of wine from Mom's sister. Then everyone looked at me. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. I told them this was something I'd been working on for months, something I hoped would secure their future and show them how much they meant to me. Mom opened it with this expectant smile. Inside were 2 documents. The first was the deed to their house, showing that the mortgage had been paid in full. The second was an eviction notice. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Dad was the first to speak, asking what this meant. I explained calmly that I had paid off their mortgage completely, all $180,000 of it. However, since they'd made it clear through their group text that I wasn't really part of this family, I decided to exercise my rights as the new owner of the property. Mom's face went white. She asked if this was some kind of joke. I assured her it wasn't. The eviction notice gave them 30 days to vacate. Since Sarah was apparently more family than I was, she was welcome to find somewhere else for all of them to live. Noah exploded. He started yelling about how I couldn't do this, how it was their house, how I was being psychotic. I remained calm and explained that legally, it was now my house. I'd paid for it in full. The deed was in my name. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. She stammered something about not knowing about the group text, but I cut her off. I told her this wasn't about her personally, but about the family's priorities. Dad tried the guilt trip approach. He talked about how they'd raised me, sacrificed for me, how I couldn't just throw them out on the street. I acknowledged that they had raised me, and that's exactly why this hurts so much. They'd raised me to believe family meant something, then treated me like an outsider the moment it was convenient. Mom started crying, asking what they were supposed to do. I pulled out another envelope. Inside were the keys to a decent 2-bedroom apartment I'd already paid first and last month's rent on, along with a security deposit. It was across town, nothing fancy, but clean and safe. I told them they had a place to go, but it wouldn't accommodate Sarah. The dinner ended with Noah screaming at me, calling me vindictive and cruel. Mom was sobbing, asking how I could do this to them. Dad just sat there, staring at the documents. I left them with the papers and walked out. Update 2. The next few days were intense. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years were calling to tell me I'd gone too far. Apparently, word had spread through the family network about what I'd done. My aunt called me selfish and heartless. She said family doesn't abandon family, regardless of what happened. I reminded her that I'd literally just prevented my parents from losing their house, and asked where all these concerned relatives were when Mom and Dad were struggling with mortgage payments. Uncle Mike tried the reasonable approach, suggesting we could work something out. Maybe I could let them stay and we'd figure out some kind of arrangement. I told him that ship had sailed when they decided to give away my childhood bedroom and announced that I should be grateful to be included in the family. The worst call was from my grandmother. She was disappointed in me, she said. This wasn't how she'd raised my father, and it wasn't how they'd raised me. I loved my grandmother, so this one actually stung. But I reminded her about the group text, about being told I wasn't as valuable to the family as my brother's girlfriend. I asked her if she thought that was how families should treat each other. Noah sent me dozens of texts over those first few days. Most were insults, calling me petty and vindictive. A few were attempts at negotiation. Maybe Sarah could find somewhere else to stay. Maybe they could all apologize. But it was too late for that. They'd shown me exactly where I stood with them, and I was simply responding accordingly. The interesting thing was how quickly the narrative shifted once people learned the full story. When my cousin heard that I'd paid off the entire mortgage as a surprise gift, only to be told I wasn't really family, she went quiet. When my dad's brother found out about the group text, he stopped calling me names and started asking what Mom and Dad had been thinking. By day 4, a different pattern emerged. Some family members were starting to reach out not to criticize me, but to ask if I was okay. My cousin Lisa, who I'd always been close to, called to say she couldn't believe Mom had said that to me. She asked if there was anything she could do. But the most important call came from Sarah herself. She sounded nervous, apologetic. She wanted me to know that she'd had no idea about the group text until the dinner. Noah had sent it without telling her, and she was mortified when she found out. She'd never asked for my room, never wanted to cause family drama. She was planning to break up with Noah anyway. Apparently, this whole situation had shown her some sides of him she didn't like. I believed her. Sarah had always seemed decent enough, and she genuinely sounded upset about the whole thing. I told her I didn't blame her personally, but that didn't change what had happened between me and my family. Update 3. 2 weeks into the eviction period, things took an unexpected turn. Dad showed up at my apartment. He looked exhausted, older than I remembered. He asked if we could talk, and I let him in. He didn't try to argue about the legalities or guilt-trip me about family obligations. Instead, he just apologized. He said he'd been thinking about that group text every day since the dinner, and he was ashamed. He admitted they'd been taking me for granted, treating me like I owed them something just because I'd been successful. Dad explained that when I'd moved out and started doing well for myself, he'd felt proud, but also somehow left behind. Noah still needed them, still asked for help and advice. I seemed to have everything figured out. They'd started seeing me as self-sufficient to the point where they forgot I might still want to feel included, still want to feel like I belonged. The group text had been Noah's idea, but Dad admitted he'd gone along with it because he'd been frustrated about money and taking it out in the wrong direction. They'd been so focused on their own struggles that they'd lost sight of how their words would affect me. He wasn't asking me to change my mind about the house. He said he understood why I'd done what I did, and he probably would have reacted the same way in my position. He just wanted me to know that he was sorry, and that he loved me, and that he hoped someday we could rebuild some kind of relationship. I appreciated the apology, but I told him it would take time. The trust was broken. They'd shown me exactly how they really felt, and I couldn't just forget that. Mom called later that same day. Her approach was different from Dad's, more emotional, more desperate. She kept saying she never meant for the text to sound the way it did, that she'd been stressed about money and hadn't thought it through. She begged me to reconsider, to find some way we could work this out. But then she said something that confirmed I'd made the right decision. She asked if I could at least let them stay in the house if they promised to treat me better. She was still thinking of this as a negotiation, still trying to manage the situation rather than genuinely understanding what she'd done wrong. I told her the same thing I'd told Dad, that I appreciated her reaching out, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, Noah had gone completely silent. No more angry texts, no more phone calls. According to Dad, he was staying with a friend and barely speaking to anyone in the family. Sarah had indeed broken up with him, and he was apparently taking it hard on top of everything else. Part of me felt bad for Noah. He was younger, maybe he'd just made a stupid mistake. But then I remembered how quickly he'd been to dismiss my value to the family, how eager he'd been to give away my space to his girlfriend. He'd show me who he really was. The eviction deadline was approaching. I'd meant what I said. They had to be out by the end of the month. But I wasn't cruel. I'd made sure they had somewhere to go, and I'd even arranged for a moving company to help them pack and transport their belongings. Update 4. Moving day was surreal. I showed up to oversee the process, partly for legal reasons and partly because I wanted closure. The house felt different already, smaller somehow, less significant. All those childhood memories seemed distant now. Mom tried one more time to change my mind. She asked if there was anything she could say or do to fix this. I told her that maybe if she'd approached me right away after the group text, if she'd genuinely apologized instead of doubling down, we might have found a different solution. But too much had happened. Too much had been said. Dad was more pragmatic about the whole thing. He helped coordinate with the movers, made sure they had everything packed properly. He even thanked me for the apartment, acknowledging that I could have just left them with nothing. The strangest moment came when they were packing up my old room. All my childhood stuff was still there, comics, trophies, old school projects Mom had saved. She asked if I wanted any of it. I looked around at the remnants of the kid I used to be, the one who'd believed family was forever and love was unconditional. I told her to donate it all. That version of me was gone. Noah never showed up. Dad said he was too angry and embarrassed to face me. Maybe that was for the best. I wasn't sure what I would have said to him anyway. As the moving truck pulled away, I stood in the empty house that was now mine. It felt hollow, like a shell of something that used to matter. I'd won technically. I'd proven my point, gotten my revenge, shown them exactly what their words had cost them. But victory felt different than I'd expected. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Sarah. She thanked me for not including her in the eviction, even though she'd been at the center of the original conflict. She said she hoped my family could eventually heal from this, and that she was sorry for her part in how everything had unfolded. I appreciated the message, but I wasn't sure healing was possible. Some things, once broken, don't go back together the same way. I ended up selling the house a month later. I couldn't live there. Too many memories, too much baggage. The new owners were a young family with kids who would actually use those bedrooms, who would fill the space with laughter instead of resentment. With the proceeds from the sale, I bought a smaller place across town and put the rest into investments. I'd essentially given my parents $180,000 and gotten it back, minus some transaction costs and a lot of emotional damage. Final update. It's been 6 months now since everything happened. The family dynamics have settled into a new, strange normal. Dad and I text occasionally. Nothing deep, just checking in. He sends me pictures sometimes of his new apartment, updates about his job. He's trying, and I respect that, even if I'm not ready to fully engage yet. Mom has been to therapy, apparently. Dad mentioned it in passing, said she was working on understanding why she'd reacted the way she did. I haven't heard from her directly in months, which is probably best for both of us right now. Noah and I haven't spoken at all. Through family gossip, I've heard he's dating someone new and working a different job. Maybe someday we'll figure out how to be brothers again, but that day isn't today. The extended family has mostly moved on to other drama. A few relatives still think I went too far, but most have come around to understanding my perspective, especially once they heard the full story about the mortgage payoff. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled it differently. Maybe I could have been the bigger person, just ignored the group text, and continued with my original plan. Maybe I could have used the situation as a teaching moment instead of a revenge plot. But then I remember how it felt to read those words. Unlike you, she actually contributes to this family. And just be grateful you were ever included. And I know I made the only choice I could live with. They'd shown me exactly where I stood with them, and I'd simply responded accordingly. The hardest part isn't the family relationships I lost. It's realizing that maybe they were never as solid as I thought they were in the first place. Maybe I'd been living with an illusion of belonging that was always conditional, always dependent on me playing a certain role and never asking for too much in return. I'm building new relationships now, chosen family instead of biological family. People who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. People who would never question my place at their table. My parents learned an expensive lesson about taking people for granted. I learned an even more expensive lesson about the difference between unconditional love and transactional relationships. In the end, maybe we all got exactly what we deserved.